Well, I'm joined now by Jasmine El-Gamal, who is the host of the View From Here podcast and also a former US Pentagon Middle East advisor. Jasmine, always a pleasure talking to you. I mean, looking at the scenes on our screens today, we're talking about the first visit to the United States by a Syrian head of state since independence from France in 1946. I mean, what a stunning year it's been for Syria's new president.
Absolutely. So good to be with you as always, Tom. I mean, certainly a stunning year, a hugely significant moment for Syria, for Syrians, for this Syrian president. If you look at the background of President Al-Sharaa, where he is now, how far he's come, the way that he's developed, and the fact that he's now meeting with the President of the United States in the White House, it's absolutely unbelievable. But it really just goes to show how much progress the Syrian president has made in reaching out to key members of the international community, trying to allay their concerns, trying to share his vision and Syrians' vision for what they want their country to look like and to offer in the future. So I expect that we'll see a lot of conversations around how to stabilize Syria even further. We're going to hear them talking about economic development, about counterterrorism, and different kinds of issues that are all going to be related to the question of how do we continue to help Syria on its path towards becoming a stable and secure member of this region.
Right, and I mean, another sign of just how different the world is from 12 months ago when Bashar al-Assad was still in power. I mean, there are reports that the United States is planning to establish some sort of a military presence in Syria. It could be an airbase close to Damascus. I don't know if you've heard those reports, but if confirmed, I mean, what an extraordinary development.
That's right. And, you know, the U.S. has maintained a presence and has had a presence in Syria throughout the years as part of its work towards the countering ISIS or defeat ISIS coalition. The U.S. has always had an interest, this is back from when I used to work in government, of trying to counter that ISIS threat, which is still very much present. But now we're seeing the government of the United States actually for the first time participating and cooperating with the central government in Damascus, as opposed to what it was doing before, which was sort of working around the central government. And so it's a huge step forward in terms of the level of cooperation between the two countries. I mean, Tom, I know you've seen this too. This is going back to President Trump's first meeting with Ahmed Al-Sharaa, with the president of Syria in Saudi Arabia, where he really seems to have taken a personal interest and a personal liking to the Syrian president and is influenced very much by leaders like Crown Prince MBS in Saudi Arabia and President Erdogan in Turkey, who are all letting Donald Trump know that the key to a stable and secure region really is Syria. And it looks like he's listening to them.
Right. I mean, that meeting in May in Saudi Arabia had President Trump describing President Al-Sharaa as a young, attractive guy, a tough guy, a fighter with a strong past. I mean, why do you think President Trump decided to take a chance on President Al-Sharaa, and to what do you attribute what appears to be very good chemistry between the two men?
I think a lot of it is about personal relationships. I mean, Trump famously operates on the basis of whether or not he simply likes you. So there's that personal connection. I think by all accounts, whenever President Sharaa has met with someone, he has walked away, or that person has walked away being quite impressed, or at the very least willing to keep an open mind. We saw him meeting with, I believe it was Congressman Brian Mast, who had been a holdup in the conversations about how quickly and whether to remove fully the sanctions on Syria. And the congressman walked away from it, you know, saying, okay, I believe that Syria needs support. So he seems to have this ability to be very thoughtful and very measured and very persuasive in laying out this future vision for Syria, which is predicated on peace with its neighbors, on economic development, development for Syrians, a better future for them, and a pathway for Syria to become a really constructive member of the Middle East, which, if you look at Donald Trump's ultimate plan for regional peace and the pathway to that peace certainly runs through Syria.
Right, and another sign of the overall alignment between Damascus and Washington, another report emerging that Syria has foiled in recent months a number of, well, at least two credible, I'm told, plots to assassinate President Ahmed Al-Sharaa. These were plots cooked up by the Islamic State group. I mean, do those reports sound credible to you? I mean, have you heard anything about them?
I haven't been following that, to be honest with you, but I will say, like I was saying before, Tom, that the ISIS threat continues to be a really relevant threat and has been, even when it was out of the headlines. You have ISIS activity still ongoing in Syria. You have the camps in the north that hold former ISIS fighters that is going to have to be dealt with. Of course, it also holds women and children, the children, of course, who had nothing to do with the choices that one or both of their parents made. But it just goes to show the level of challenges that still remain. And counterterrorism is going to be one of those areas of focus between the United States and Syria, particularly because of the extent of those challenges. So we are expecting to see a joining of Syria into the counter-ISIS coalition, or the defeat ISIS coalition, as the administration calls it, de-ISIS, joining 88 other countries in that coalition and taking other steps similarly, whether it's vis-a-vis talks with Israel or Turkey or the Gulf, really looking at ways to start securing Syria's borders and dealing with the threats against it from the outside in.
Right. I mean, Syria was, of course, until 12 months ago, 11 months ago, a key ally of Russia and Iran. And since the fall of Bashar al-Assad, I'm just wondering whether Russia and Iran's loss has translated directly into gains for the United States, not only, but also maybe Turkey and the Gulf to some extent as well. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Tom. And I would say, I mean, especially when it comes to these sort of regional rivalries that have played out in Syria for decades, I think it's too soon to really tell where the dust settles and who ends up with more influence versus less. I will say that it is certainly true that Iranian influence has diminished, in no short part to the decimation of Iran's proxy Hezbollah, who had been operating in Syria for years, acting as a conduit between Iran and Hezbollah in Lebanon. And when it comes to Russia, I will say that another characteristic of President Al-Sharaa, other than his ability to convince people and sound convincing and thoughtful, is that he's also known to be quite pragmatic. And so the way that he's dealing with Russia is along those lines of pragmatism, where he's certainly not, pushing them away. He's not trying to form any enmity with Russia, but he is making it clear in his own way and through conversations with the Russians that Syria is a sovereign country, will look after Syrian interests, and is happy to cooperate with other countries based on mutual interests, but that things are going to be very different from the way they were in the past.
And do you think there have been elements from Russia and Iran, as well as from the Assad regime, that have tried to interfere in Syria's current reality and perhaps muddy the waters to some extent? Do you think there's been an element of that?
I mean, not to my knowledge in terms of just the day-to-day operations. I mean, you have to, if you look at the big picture, and look at all the different interests of the different countries bordering Syria. And this, Syria as a country, as I've mentioned, has long been a battleground for proxy battles between its neighbors. So whether that was Russia, and not just its neighbors, globally as well. So under the Assad regime, whether it was the US versus Russia, whether it was Turkey trying to exert its influence in the north, or the Gulf trying to exert its influence, it's always been a bit of a battleground. And I think what the president is trying to do is really try to minimize that external influence and try to get back to the core issues that Syrians are going to be really challenged with moving forward: economic security, economic development, and counterterrorism. I expect those to be really the two most significant pillars of conversation in his visit with President Trump.
Okay, you had a feline visitor there while you were talking to me.
I know.
Who wanted to be part of the conversation
on the situation.
I mean, clearly uniting Syria is a monumental task for a number of the reasons that we've mentioned, the fabric of society really, and the fact that the country has been severely damaged by 14 years of violence. How would you assess the overall progress up until this point, these last 11 months of President Ahmed Al-Sharaa?
That's a really good question, Tom, and I would obviously leave it to Syrians to have, a verdict on that. But I will say, as an analyst, as an outside observer, that there have been both positive steps on the part of the central government as well as missteps, and that the central government seems to be trying hard to find a route towards inclusivity and inclusive governance. You've seen terrible occurrences in the last year, both on the coast, in Latakia, and in the south, in Sweda. You've seen the central government struggle with that and come under heavy criticism from certain aspects of Syrian society, but one can, I think, say that there is a move towards a more inclusive government and a move to listen to different elements of Syrian society. Whether or not the central government is doing that enough to assuage different Syrians' fears, I would leave that up to Syrians really to make that judgment.
And lastly, and just briefly, if you will, I mean, how far off do you think elections could be in Syria?
It's a $1 million question, really. I think that there are elements of security and economic development that I think the president of Syria is focused on right now as his priorities. I can't tell you about a timeline for elections. I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Well, that's all we have time for. A very big thank you to Jasmine El-Gamal, host of the View from Here podcast and former US Pentagon Middle East advisor. Thanks again.